Now, I want to reiterate some of the things that I had discussed over the weekend. And I do think it's something worth paying attention to. I don't think you should take this lightly. Yes, there is a fracturing sort of happening in within the American right. Now, I use that term because it represents, when I say stuff like that or the economic right, because people that are aligned there on, like, especially some of the key issues, they call themselves different things depending on what those key issues are that they prioritize as far as how they rank that. Okay. So you have people that call themselves conservatives, conservatarians, libertarians, independents. People call themselves all these various terms, but I think people get way too much tied in instead of focusing on what they actually mean. We sit here and argue labels and semantics all the time. So you're seeing this fracturing for various different reasons, okay? And I want to kind of go through some of what I, again, discussed over the weekend. And I said that I know people feel like I'm trying to insult them when I say this, and it comes out maybe a little harsh. But when I say that being pro Trump was never a political philosophy, what I mean is that it was never a coherent ideological like position. By itself, it's not. It's supporting a guy, but it's not necessarily meaning that you are rooted in some sort of like political philosophy. A lot of that was dependent on, and the reason why that worked, especially going into 2016, the reason why it worked so well was timing. A lot of people don't want to admit that timing had a lot to do with that. And so you had this coalition that was built around Trump's strong personality. You had all of what was happening in the world at that given moment. And yeah, like I said, timing had a lot to do with that. It was the perfect storm, which was how I, again, worded it. And you had his forceful personality. You had the timing of his campaign. You had the current political status quo that seemed to be really hurting Americans. Some of the stuff that they had been advocating over the years, especially during the Obama years, just it sucked. They had their own economic issues and the economic turmoil when people wanted something different. And so you had this guy that seemed like he was bucking the system. He was a guy that was, again, his strong personality aided him in this. And I think, like, to his credit, during that period of time, he was probably the only one. Though timing had a lot to do with it, you'd be hard pressed to find another person that existed in the world that also could have done the same thing. It was something that was unique to his personality at the time, which is why it worked so well. But that being said, so many people are now coming to terms with the fact that these people that got behind Trump, they differ on very, very key, very, very specific issues because of what was happening in the world and why it had worked. They differ on their political beliefs. They differ on their economic philosophy, and a lot of them differ. If they share similar philosophy, they differ on priorities. What issue is most important to them and what they want addressed first. As far as the speed is concerned, that differs from person to person, even if you do largely agree on most of the issues. Now, what separates this current administration, obviously, from the previous one, is that this is his last shot. I know they joke about Trump 2028, but there's no re-election here. We have midterms, which is going to be very telling. But there's no wait until next time. And because of that, people, I think, are a lot more antsy on seeing their agendas fulfilled. Now, again, that does not mean that there aren't people that are out there that are like, he's fine, he's doing what you wanted him to do. But for other people, and this is where you have to be honest with yourself, they do not feel that way. In some cases, they feel as if he's actually advocating for things that are antithetical to why they supported him. Chinese, 600,000 Chinese students, the H-1B fiasco, the Epstein stuff. and how his administration has handled that. It might not be a big deal to you, but for some other people that supported him, that was like the issue for them. And when they see someone that they support not fulfilling that agenda, well, they take exception to it. And you can say, well, people are impatient. It's only been a year in. Again, how people prioritize this stuff differs from person to person, and that's what a lot of people are finding out. But a lot of what's happening with this fracture, it's not necessarily about, and I'm not even speaking to like these big political pundits that have their positions on what's happening in the political landscape and the divisiveness that's happening out of that. I'm not even speaking of that. Yes, though, I will say that it doesn't help Trump at all going after guys like a Massey. I think he's finding that guy is way more popular. They're spending they have billionaires spending millions of dollars or trying to spend millions of dollars to get him out of that seat. He's not going to lose. They've already done this. For people that have short-term memories, they've tried to do this with Massey before, and they've been unsuccessful. Where he's at, he's extremely popular. He's not going anywhere. Okay? But it's not helping him out. So maybe people feel that he's below the belt. So again, that's quite the conundrum. The strong personality, which people fell in love with him, could also be a reason why that you start to see some of this fracturing happening. Excuse me. So now, and this is where it really gets people get upset with me in saying this. I'm just speaking of facts. You know it, and I know it is true. With Trump's strong personality and the phenomena of it, a lot of people saw their rise, especially in like the content creation space, from latching on to that wagon. Okay. And because they know that they have to attribute pretty much not everything, but a lot of their rise to exactly him and his movement. They're not jumping off of that train. Not yet, at least. Some will. Some will be like, screw this, I'm out. I've seen that happen with some others. A lot, they're going to go down with that ship if it's going down, okay? Wherever the ship goes, whether it goes up or down, whether it sails perfectly to its destination or it sinks, they're going with it regardless, okay? So what unfortunately, though, happens with that, and it's not just with like content creators, is that for them, they're pro-Trump. So it's taking whatever position that he has at the given moment, no matter if he contradicts himself. But they take whatever position that he has. They trust the process, right? And like I said, when you have those careers that have been launched, or rather it was launched off slapping that red hat on, they are going to be loyal to the man. And they're going to be hella dependent. Others, not so much, especially those that don't give a shit about any of that. Their careers aren't in politics. Their careers aren't in doing content, doing videos and streams. And they're frustrated, right? They're loud. They may speak their minds on social media, but they're not tied to that, okay? So you have that side that cares about they have the loyalty, and the other side is just like, they care about these specific issues. And if he's not living up, or if they feel like stuff is getting worse, or they feel like something is not being fulfilled, they take exception to it. And like I said, over the weekend, you're finding that these groups are not really aligned. They aligned for a moment to build a coalition around a perfectly timed, like, again, that 2016 year. So much was going, and it worked to their benefit. But you're seeing just how different a lot of these people are. So, and I talked about this before. I talked about this even after the first, after the Biden, Trump 20 whatever the fuck, right when Biden was elected or whatever. And obviously, yeah, most popular president of all time, apparently. That said, the right now is trying to figure out what does this look like? What does the political landscape look like post-Trump? Nobody seems to agree on that. There's no unified answer, and you're seeing fractures because of that. People are all over the fucking place. And they're not helping themselves out. Obviously, people are jumping down each other's throats and such. I've made this point before. I know people give a lot of shit to the left, talk about they always eat their own. I don't know what the hell y'all been paying attention to. The right eats his own, if not just as much and as often. Okay? Even if it's for a different reason, it happens. Okay? This is not something that is exclusive to the left. I don't want to go as far as to talk about or say that this is more of a cult of a personality thing. What I think people have a difficulty understanding is that not everybody is with getting behind a personality politically, because that by itself does not better their own life, if that makes sense, right? So people realize, I know I talk about it a lot, winning elections doesn't mean shit to me, right? Whether a guy that I liked or I fond of ended up winning, whether I had something to do with it, whether I did not, doesn't mean anything. What matters is results, right? And for some people, they're looking at their bills. They're saying that the cost of living has not greatly improved. I know people are now talking about this inflation, but everybody understands, definitely looking at inflation year to year. The money crisis is very much still a crisis, and it's not even close to being resolved. So people are looking at that. They're paying attention to that. They're looking at the economics, looking at their taxes, looking at the fact that their lives aren't maybe improving. Yeah, some so won a position. And then you're like, oh, well, the libs are mad or we're owning the left, but that's not good enough for a lot of people. It's like that. I can't pay my mortgage, or you can't pay your car note, or you can't pay for your food with leftist tears. You know, so it's going to be an interesting time. It is very much fractured. For various reasons. It's something worth keeping tabs on. It's something worth paying attention. If you think it's just, I believe you're living under a rock. If you think that this is simply, a couple of commentators are at each other's necks and that's all that's being represented right now. No. It goes much deeper than that. And I honestly don't know what it's going to look like on the other side, but we'll see.